Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, when did this happen? Maybe you've always been reasonably healthy. You've never been an Olympic athlete, but you've done okay. Then somewhere in your 40s, everything seems to change. The weight doesn't come off like it used to. Your energy disappears by mid-afternoon. You sleep all night, yet still wake up tired. Your knees complain every time you stand up, and climbing a flight of stairs suddenly feels like somebody secretly added 3 extra steps. So you start wondering, am I just getting old? Well, according to fascinating research from Stanford University, your body may not actually age the way most of us think it does. In fact, the scientists discovered something that surprised even them. Instead of aging in one slow, steady line, your body appears to go through major biological shifts, almost like somebody quietly flips a switch. One of the biggest? Around age 44. And once you understand what's happening, a lot of those confusing changes suddenly start making sense. Quick note before we jump in. I'm not a doctor, and nothing in this video is medical advice. It's here to help you understand the science a little better, but always work with your healthcare provider before making changes to your health, medications, or diet. Today we're going to look at what Stanford researchers actually discovered, why so many people notice dramatic changes after 40, and, most importantly, what you can realistically do to help your body age better. Because here's the good news, this isn't a story about giving up. It's a story about understanding what's happening inside your body, so you can work with it instead of against it. Let's go. Most of us grow up believing aging happens a little bit at a time. One day you're 20, then 30, then 40, and every year you simply lose a tiny bit of strength, a tiny bit of energy, and a tiny bit of fitness. Like money slowly leaking from a bank account. Makes sense, right? Well, that's exactly what scientists thought too. But when researchers began following people over time and measuring thousands of different molecules inside their bodies, they noticed something strange. The changes weren't happening evenly. Instead, certain biological systems seemed remarkably stable, until suddenly, they weren't. Imagine driving along a motorway. The road is smooth, everything feels normal. Then without warning, you hit a speed bump. Not because you were driving differently, because the road changed beneath you. That's the picture researchers started seeing. Not a gentle slope, more like a series of biological speed bumps. And one of the biggest appeared right around the mid-40s. Now before you panic, this doesn't mean your body suddenly falls apart on your 44th birthday. It doesn't work like that. Your metabolism doesn't wake up one morning, stretch, and announce, you know what? I'm retiring. If only it gave us that kind of notice. Instead, millions of tiny changes begin adding up. Some affect how you process fats. Others influence your muscles, your immune system, even how well your body deals with stress. Individually, you'd barely notice them. Together, they can completely change how you feel. And here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers weren't looking for this pattern. They found it by accident. Which raises an obvious question. What exactly did the researchers discover? To answer that, we first need to understand how this study was different from almost every aging study that came before it. Most studies compare one group of younger people with one group of older people. That's useful, but it's a bit like taking 2 photographs taken years apart and trying to work out everything that happened in between. The Stanford team did something much smarter. They followed adults over time and repeatedly measured thousands of different molecules circulating throughout their bodies. Not just cholesterol, not just blood sugar, not just a handful of common blood tests. They looked at proteins, fats, genes being switched on and off, microbes living in the gut, and many other biological markers that together paint a much bigger picture of what's happening beneath the surface. In other words, instead of looking at one dashboard warning light, they were looking at almost the entire dashboard. And that's when something unexpected appeared. They expected most of these biological markers to drift gradually over the years. Instead, many of them changed in clusters, almost as if different systems in the body were saying, okay, it's time. One cluster showed up around the mid-40s, another appeared around the early 60s. Now that's important because many people describe those exact decades as the time they suddenly notice things changing. Not gradually, suddenly. Your favorite jeans don't fit anymore. You need longer to recover after exercise. You don't seem to have the same stamina you had just a few years ago. You catch yourself making little noises every time you stand up. Don't worry, I think we've all done that one. Now, before anyone says, so it's all downhill after 44, absolutely not. And this is where I think the media sometimes gets these studies wrong. The Stanford researchers weren't saying that everyone suddenly becomes unhealthy at 44. They weren't saying you're destined to gain weight, or lose muscle, or feel exhausted. What they found was that your biology becomes more dynamic during certain periods of life. Think of it like renovating a house. When the builders arrive, everything looks messy for a while. Rooms are changing, walls are moving, there's dust everywhere. But that doesn't mean the house is collapsing. It means it's changing. Your body is doing something similar. The question isn't whether change happens. The question is, how do you respond to it? And here's the part that really caught my attention. Many of the biggest biological changes involved systems that you actually have some influence over. Your muscles, your metabolism, inflammation, your body's ability to recover. In other words, this isn't just a story about aging, it's a story about opportunity. Because once you understand what's changing, you can start making choices that help your body adapt. And that's exactly where we're heading next. Because the biggest surprise wasn't simply that these biological shifts happen. It was discovering which parts of your body change the most. A quick mention. If you like any of the t-shirts that I am wearing in the videos, designed by my wife Jill, they can be purchased from the Geek Your Health website, link in the description, okay? Let's get back to the video. The first big change the researchers noticed involves something almost everyone over 40 talks about: metabolism. Now, metabolism has become one of those words that's blamed for just about everything. Can't lose weight? Must be your metabolism. Feeling tired? Must be your metabolism. Found yourself eating a biscuit at 10 o'clock last night? Well, let's not blame the metabolism for everything. But here's the interesting part. The researchers found changes in molecules involved in fat metabolism and the way our bodies process energy. That doesn't mean your metabolism suddenly breaks at 44, but it does help explain why the things that worked in your 30s don't always work in your 40s and 50s. You might be eating roughly the same meals, doing roughly the same amount of activity, yet the scales seem to be heading in the wrong direction. If you've ever stood on the bathroom scales and thought, that can't be right, you're definitely not alone. Now here's something that surprised me. For years people were told, it's just your age, almost as if there was nothing you could do. But that's not really what this research suggests. Your biology is changing, which means your strategy might need to change too. And if one of the biggest changes you've noticed is stubborn weight around your middle, don't automatically assume it's simply getting older. Insulin resistance can begin years before someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it changes the way your body handles sugar and stores fat. I did an entire video explaining insulin resistance in plain English, what causes it, and the warning signs to look out for. If that sounds familiar, there's a link above. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The next big change wasn't about weight at all. It was about muscle. Think back 20 years. You helped a friend move house. Your back was a bit sore the next day. By Monday, you'd forgotten all about it. Fast forward to today. You spend Saturday pulling weeds in the garden, or painting a bedroom, or carrying a few heavy boxes into the loft. And by Tuesday, you're still walking around like you've gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. Sound familiar? That's because muscle isn't just about strength, it's about recovery. And recovery changes as we get older. Part of that is because we naturally lose muscle mass as the years go by if we don't actively work to maintain it. Researchers call this sarcopenia. Now don't let the fancy name put you off. All it really means is the gradual loss of muscle that happens with age. Here's the geeky bit. Muscle is like your body's savings account. The more you build up over the years, the more you've got to draw on later in life. If you never make deposits, eventually the balance starts getting pretty low. That's why strength training doesn't just make you look stronger, it gives your future self something to work with. And before you're thinking, I don't want to become a bodybuilder, don't worry. Nobody's suggesting you need to spend 2 hours a day lifting enormous weights. For most people, 2 or 3 sensible strength sessions each week can make a remarkable difference over time. And the best part? Your muscles still respond to training well into your 70s and even beyond. They don't stop adapting just because you've had another birthday. Now, muscle isn't the only thing that affects recovery. Sleep plays a huge role too. If you're one of those people who keeps waking up at 3 in the morning and then spends an hour staring at the ceiling, wondering why your brain has suddenly decided it's morning, we actually covered that in another episode. I'll put the link above. Poor sleep doesn't just leave you feeling tired the next day. It also makes it harder for your body to repair itself, which means you can end up in a vicious cycle. You don't recover properly, so you exercise less, you lose a little more muscle, your metabolism slows a little more, and suddenly the cycle keeps feeding itself. But here's the encouraging news. Cycles work both ways. Start sleeping better, start moving more, start building muscle, and over time that cycle begins working in your favor instead. That's one of the most hopeful messages to come out of this research. Your body is changing, but it's still listening. And what you do next matters far more than most people realize. Which brings us to another discovery that affects almost everyone, even if they don't know it's happening. Now, there was another pattern in the Stanford research that caught my attention. It involved inflammation. Now, before your eyes glaze over, because you've heard that word 1,000 times, stick with me. Because inflammation isn't always a bad thing. In fact, it's one of the reasons you're still here. If you cut your finger, inflammation helps you heal. If you catch a virus, inflammation helps your immune system fight back. Without it, our bodies would be in serious trouble. The problem isn't inflammation. The problem is when your body starts acting like there's a small emergency happening, all the time. Think of it like your home's smoke alarm. If it goes off because you've burnt the toast, that's useful. If it goes off 24 hours a day, eventually you've got a problem. That's a bit like what's happening inside many of us as we get older. Our bodies can become slightly more inflamed over time. Not enough to make us obviously ill, but enough to affect how we feel. A little more stiffness, a little more fatigue, a little slower to recover. Now here's something I found fascinating. Many of the same habits that help your muscles also help keep inflammation under control. Regular movement, good sleep, eating enough protein, managing stress. They're not glamorous, they're certainly not as exciting as some miracle supplement promising to reverse aging overnight, but they work. And that's something worth remembering, because the older I get, the more I realize that boring usually beats exciting when it comes to health. Now, there's another area where researchers notice significant changes, and honestly, it's one that explains something I've wondered about myself: recovery. Have you noticed that little injuries seem to take forever now? You knock your elbow, and you're still aware of it a week later. You tweak your shoulder gardening, and somehow it's still reminding you about it every time you reach for the top shelf. I definitely started noticing this in my own life, not because I suddenly became unhealthy, but because recovery simply wasn't as quick as it used to be. Now that doesn't mean you've become fragile. It means your body needs a little more support than it once did. More sleep, better nutrition, a bit more patience. The mistake many people make is trying to live exactly as they did 20 years ago, while ignoring the fact that their body now has different needs. That's a bit like putting diesel into a petrol car. You're using yesterday's instructions for today's machine. And here's where I think this study becomes genuinely empowering. The researchers didn't discover a biological countdown clock. They discovered that certain systems become more sensitive during different stages of life. Sensitive, not broken. There's a huge difference. Because if something is broken, there's not much you can do. But if something is sensitive, you can work with it. You can adapt. And that's exactly what successful aging is. Not pretending you're 30, not wishing you were younger, simply understanding what your body needs now. Here's the geeky bit. Your body is constantly rebuilding itself. Your muscles, your bones, your skin, even many of the cells inside your organs are continually being repaired and replaced. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. Biologically speaking, you're a work in progress, every single day. And that's incredibly good news, because it means today's choices become tomorrow's body. Not overnight, not next week, but over months and years, they really add up. Which brings us to what I think is the biggest takeaway from this entire study. It isn't what changes after 44, it's what you can do about it. So, what do we do with all of this? If you're anything like me, you might have watched the first part of this video and thought, great, my body starts changing around 44, thanks for that. But I don't think that's the real message here. In fact, I think it's the opposite. The Stanford researchers didn't discover that your best years are behind you. They discovered that your body changes in ways we didn't fully understand before. And once you understand those changes, you can start working with them instead of fighting against them. Think about it. If you know your muscles need a little more attention, you start building strength. If you know your recovery takes longer, you make sleep more of a priority. If you know your metabolism has changed, you stop beating yourself up because the old approach isn't working anymore. Instead, you adapt. And that's what healthy aging really is. Not trying to be 25 again. Not chasing every new supplement that promises to reverse aging. Not believing every headline that tells you everything is doomed after 40. It's understanding your body. Making a few smart changes. And being consistent enough to let those changes add up. Because here's something I genuinely believe. Your future health isn't decided by one birthday. It's shaped by thousands of small decisions you make every single day. Going for that walk, choosing the healthier meal, picking up those weights a couple of times a week, getting to bed a little earlier. They don't feel life-changing in the moment, but over the course of a year, they absolutely are. And maybe that's the biggest lesson from this entire study. Your body is always listening. Every healthy choice sends it a signal. Every workout, every good night's sleep, every balanced meal. They're all telling your body the same thing. Build me stronger. And remarkably, your body keeps responding. Not perfectly, not instantly, but far longer than most people ever imagine. So if you're in your 40s, don't fear what's happening. Understand it. If you're in your 50s, it's not too late. If you're in your 60s, your body is still capable of adapting. Science keeps proving that over and over again. And I think that's something worth being optimistic about. Remember, getting older is mandatory. Getting healthier is still a choice. I'm Nate, and this is Geek Your Health. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. It helps YouTube share this video with other people who might need to hear it too. And if you'd like to take the next step, head over to geekyourhealth.com and grab your free downloads. You'll find the link down in the description. If today's video got you thinking about why your body changes after 40, I'd really recommend watching our video on insulin resistance next. It explains one of the biggest reasons so many people struggle with weight gain and low energy as they get older, and I think it fits perfectly with what we've talked about today. Take care, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.